Hello, this is the Duty to Warn podcast. I'm your host, John Gartner, and today we are especially privileged to have Philip Zimbardo, Professor Emeritus of Psychology at Stanford University and one of the most famous living psychologists today. Some of you may remember from your Psych 101 classes the 1971 Stanford prison experiment. Has actually been the subject of several movies, one of the few psychological experiments, maybe the only one that can be said about. And more recently, Dr. Zimbardo wrote an article in Psychology Today called The Elephant in the Room. So tell me, Dr. Zimbardo, the elephant in the room that you wrote about is Donald Trump's mental health. Why is it important for us to talk as mental health professionals about Donald Trump's mental health?
Donald Trump is the most powerful person in the world at this moment because he has access to all of the resources of the American military. He has access to bombs and missiles and planes. And so that makes him powerful. Most nations in the world previously respected America. And what makes him a serious problem is that he is what we would consider not only narcissistic and egotistical to the extreme, but he fits the category of an unbridled present hedonist. So I've done lots of research on time perspective. I wrote a book called The Time Paradox. And essentially, people fall into three categories: past, present, and future. And most people who are professionals are future-oriented, meaning when they make a decision, before they make the decision, they think about the consequences, the pluses and minuses, the gains and losses, the risks. And present hedonists make decisions on the spur of the moment. They are impulsive. They are reactive, not proactive. Typically, these people, especially when they're young, are prone to become addicted to various things, because once they do it, if it's fun and pleasurable, they keep doing it. And we have never had a president of the United States, or maybe the president of any major business, who is like a present hedonistic child. He says whatever he thinks. He doesn't believe facts make a difference. He's simply used to being the big boss in his enterprise, and he's carrying over into the presidency of the United States that same mentality that he's the big boss and he can do whatever he wants, regardless of what his cabinet says, regardless of what the Republican Party says, because he's used to being number one. And the reason I say he's dangerous is because he's unpredictable in what he will do, except everything he's doing has one goal: to increase big business profits. And he gives various excuses why he doesn't believe in climate change, why they are now about to start limiting national program. I mean, national landmark around the world, national parks, national park, so that essentially so they can sell it to private enterprise. So he's dangerous, and again, he's addicted to tweeting. Who ever heard of a president at 3 a.m. sending out tweets? And again, he distorts reality. He just said recently his administration has done more in the first part of the year than any administration since FDR, and FDR was dealing with depression. He has not signed a single bill. So it's exactly the opposite. So again, he just says whatever comes to his mind, whatever makes him look good. So he's dangerous. Now, I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I can't talk to his mental health, but I am an expert on time perspective, and I'm putting him in this category of an uncontainable present hedonist. Now,
so he doesn't think about consequences. That's very important.
No, meaning you make decisions because it feels good, it feels right, and it's never weighing what are the pluses and minuses, as we all do. Every decision has a potential gain loss. Every decision involves some probability functioning. I think he cannot think in probabilities. He thinks in all or none. Should we do it or not do it? And again, with the climate change, the Pope begged him to sign the Paris Accords. Every single president in the meeting in Taormina, Sicily, begged him, and he had no intention of doing that. And he said, "I'll think about it." But he had already made a decision to not have America be part of the climate change organization, which is one of the most important, important things about that we all have to be concerned about: the future destruction of our environment because of emissions. And the reason he's not doing that is big business is telling him it's very costly to build in devices that limit carbon dioxide emissions. And if we do, it'll reduce our profit. We'll have to pass it on to customers, so it'll raise prices. So everything is a business decision, has nothing, immediate business decision, has nothing to do with the reality of, climate change that we now know, around the world is altering our environment. That we know the seas are heating up. We know the ice is melting in the Antarctic at North Pole. We know all of these facts, and now what he's doing is eliminating the Environmental Protection Agency. He's taking out all of the 10 years of research that were built up there. So it's not simply he has a point of view. What he's doing is destructive rather than.
So you mentioned a couple things I want to pick up on. One, this category you mentioned of the hedonist who only acts out of the moment. It seems like tweeting is a good example for him, because some of these tweets they're saying might have legal ramifications for him, and yet he does seem to get a certain pleasure, some people will call it a sadistic pleasure, from lashing out at people through tweets, and he is addicted to it. So would you see that maybe as an example of the kind of personality type you're talking about?
Yeah, so again, it's tweeting on a regular basis that he's been doing for the past year, in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., and it's always about self-adulation, what he's doing, what he's thinking, or attacking somebody who's critical of him, attacking the media. The media has made him, from the election, during the campaign, because he said such ridiculous things. Trump made front page news. Hillary Clinton was on page 27. So in a way, Trump is the creation of the media that he's constantly criticizing, and they still, the media in quotes, still love him because he says really outlandish, crazy, stupid, weird, unpredictable things, and so that makes the news.
Do you think that he believes these crazy things that he says? What's your thought about that? That's been one of the big debates among mental health professionals.
Yeah, it's hard to know. I think somebody like that convinces himself that he says it over and over, and then all the voices in his head agree that this is wrong or that this is right. It's almost like when somebody's paranoid. In paranoia is you have these voices in your head that are telling you that somebody is dangerous, something is wrong that needs your action. And if you don't have and you don't have any grounding in reality, then you come to believe these as truths. So I'm not saying he's paranoid, but I think he actually believes that what he is doing is wonderful for America, wonderful for the world, wonderful for the Republican Party, but see, he's just been used to for decades being the big boss of Trump Enterprise. So he's running America as if it was Trump Enterprise with a star that it's still not a profit-making business for him, but it will be eventually, obviously, after he finishes.
Right, and some people have pointed out he can't recreate the environment that he had at Trump Industries, where he was the big boss, as you say, and he could surround himself with yes men. He could insulate himself from negative opinions and not focus on things he didn't want to focus on. It's totally different than the accountability and the visibility that takes place in the White House, and that discrepancy may be driving him nuts.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, there is this discrepancy because what he says now gets national, international visibility immediately. But again, think about many of his meetings with world leaders were in his Trump office, not in the White House.
Right.
That is, so essentially, he's saying, and again, his wife just moved into the White House, months later. So it's still Trump Towers, Trump Florida is on a par with the White House. So that's never happened before. I mean, again, you remember he used to criticize Obama for taking an annual vacation to Hawaii, 2 weeks, once a year after Congress was out. And here he's going every weekend, to his Florida base, and I guess somebody said it costs $3 million to have the security surrounding his goings, being there, coming back, and it doesn't matter to him. But again, he's unpredictable because it's not clear, So let's say with the latest thing with Qatar. So again, he is supporting Saudi Arabia because he just sold them, I don't know, $5 billion worth of arms. So it's a profitable deal. And then essentially saying America supports, Saudi Arabia. Well, and then that prompted Saudi Arabia and other countries to put a blockade on Qatar. But Qatar has a American military base, and I'm sure he knew nothing about that. So you can't be supporting countries that have a blockade against another country where we depend on that country to sustain a military base, which is critical in the Middle East. So I think sometimes
he doesn't think through these consequences.
Well, but also I think sometimes just ignorance. That is, It's not that he says, it's not, again, he's not weighing, well, we certainly want the Saudis on our side because they have billions of dollars and they influence the price of oil. And I'm sure when he said any of that, he never asked about Qatar. He never even probably heard about it. And it was only afterwards people say, hey, wait a minute, we have a military base there. What are we going to do about that? The other my biggest concern is North Korea, because again, North Korea keeps pushing to get an intercontinental ballistic missile, and the danger is at some point he's going to say, we're not going to deal with this anymore, and we're going to take action. So I could see him instigating a military action against North Korea, saying, that America doesn't have to be, a puppet, to this crazy guy in North Korea. We got to show him who's number one, who's boss.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think that is the real danger, especially, I think, as he's more threatened by the Russia investigation. I think it pushes him even more towards some kind of desperate lashing out. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, the other thing that's happening now is, our relationships with Russia is getting worse and worse. So again, we had gone through the Cold War. There was a rapprochement. We were having at least a functional relationship. And now, suddenly, Russia is becoming our enemy. And again, it's
or our master. We don't know if we've been influenced.
Well, certainly, in opposition to us, rather than a major world power that we should be working in harmony with.
Well, one of the other concerns that you wrote about is your concern that Trump is very much a totalitarian leader in the mold of a Hitler, a Stalin, a Pol Pot. This is something that has been a great concern. I wonder if you could say more about that.
Yeah, well, what's been happening now around the world is in many, many countries, in Hungary, in Turkey, in Venezuela, in the Philippines, there has been a movement of leaders who either were elected or just took power to becoming more and more right-wing totalitarian, meaning these are leaders who essentially want to have total power over all decisions, meaning they do not want any critics. So the main critics are the free media, and typically they'll either limit the media or imprison reporters, journalists, limiting education. So again, in Hungary, the government wants to take over the Central European University because it's funded by New York University, a New York University program, and Trump fits into that same mold. Is that he would like to make decisions where he does not have to be accountable to anyone other than himself and his supporters. Now, it's amazing. The most recent poll, 18% of Americans strongly support his programs. Now, the majority disapprove, but it's probably 30% strongly approve or moderately approve, when he's done nothing positive, nothing encouraging. And again, like his whole the healthcare program, immediately just says we're getting rid of the Obama thing, we're going to have something new, without thinking through this is such a complicated, multi-billion-dollar problem, and but again, it's big business versus care for poor people. But he's part of this right-wing totalitarian movement that's happening in many countries around the world, and it just simply means replacing democracy by the people with autocracy by a single leader or a limited leadership group, and it's the control of the media, control of education. And often it means replacing elected officials with appointed officials. And they've done that in many countries, make up some excuse why somebody who was elected as a governor, as the head of some ministry, gets replaced for some spurious reason by somebody in the party.
Right. You in your write-up, you said something about the Stanley Milgram experiments, relating how, as an example of how authoritarian leadership can be established much more easily than we think. Maybe you could say more about that.
Yeah, I'll say two interesting things. First of all, your listeners might find it curious that little Stanley Milgram and little Phil Zimbardo were in the same high school class in 1949, 1950 in James Monroe High School in the Bronx. We actually sat next to each other, and we had some conversations about why situations matter more than personality, even as high school kids. Now, in the Milgram study, one of the things I've been saying is that there are two important conclusions that I draw that people have not focused on. Most people focus on the idea, on the conclusion that a surprisingly large majority of ordinary American citizens living in New Haven, Connecticut in the 1960s were willing to give maximum shock to somebody they thought was that they were playing the role of teacher, and their student, they had to shock them whenever they made a mistake. So it starts off with a good purpose. We want to help people improve their memory by punishing errors. But then the student is actually a Confederate, keeps making errors. And now the question is, will you give him 300 shocks? And he's screaming, please, I have a heart condition. And the authority who starts off as a just authority who wants to improve memory suddenly is a monster saying, I don't care if he yells and screams, you got to keep going. And 2 out of every 3 people in that experiment gave maximum shock 450 volts. Now, so the first thing I say is all evil begins with 15 volts. That is, once you press that first button, you are on the slippery slope of evil because you see what's coming next. That, 15 volts, you press a button, nothing happens. But then why would you have this electric apparatus in front of you that has 100 and 200 and 300 and 400 buttons if they didn't expect anybody to go there? So once you press that first button, I think of 1,000 people Milgram tested, only a single person refused to do that. And he said, I could see that if I did that, how easy it would be to go all the way. Now, the other thing is, in Milgram's study, he did 2 experiments, one in which when the participant comes in, the experimenter says, we're running a little late, sit down and you can watch the other people. And in one condition, you see another person go all the way to 450 volts. In an alternative condition, you see 2 people refuse, say, we're not going to go on, we quit. And what happens is the baseline of obedience, which is 65%, soars to 92% when you see other people do it. But it drops to 10% when you see people rebel. And so what that means is how we behave, that other people observe us, whether we're aware of it or not, can create villains or heroes. That is, when we do something bad, break the law in some way, cross the street against a red light, go through a yellow lights at an intersection which you're driving, do littering, and other people see it, it encourages other people to do the same antisocial or illegal thing. On the other hand, when you see people take action against unjust authority, it promotes people transforming compassion into what I am calling heroic action. And so again, the Milgram study is a critical one. It was the first experiment which made people aware of how easy it is for authority to dominate intelligent people. Now, in his study, he didn't use college students. It was mostly men ages 20 to 50. So these were adults, who were playing this game of you're a teacher and this is your student. And it didn't matter. That is, the majority, when blindly obeyed. The majority of people blindly obeyed this unjust authority.
And so now we do have a subculture that are blindly listening to and obeying Donald Trump. And you also wrote about what you're concerned about, what you call the Trump effect in society and in schools. Could you say more about what you think Trump is modeling and other people are then being encouraged, like the 90% in the Milgram experiment who saw the person shocking the Confederate? We're watching Donald Trump's behavior, and it seems to be unleashing certain forces in human behavior. Yeah,
everything he's promoting negativity, negative thinking. Because he's anti-Mexicans. This whole craziness about building a wall. California agriculture depends heavily on Mexican farm workers. The entire wine industry depends on Mexican laborers coming, taking the grapes down. Same thing with olives and olive oil. Same things with artichokes and other things. So we depend on them coming. And so he now says, Mexicans suddenly are the enemy, and he's going to build a wall, which doesn't make sense because you could have a company build tunnels right under his wall. But the amazing thing is, many companies have lined up and sent in proposals to be selected to help build the wall. So here is negative. Now then, the other thing is he has these ban on Muslims. Now, yes. some terrorist attacks have been by people from Muslim countries. America is filled with immigrants. I mean, what makes America great is that every single person here is an immigrant except for Native American Indians, who sadly are living in poverty on reservations. But we are unique in that we have people from every nation in the world here.
I agree.
And somehow he's saying, no, we don't want immigrants, and we don't want Muslims. And then he has these foolish ideas. I just came back from Istanbul, where I was giving lectures. I was not allowed to bring my laptop with me in the plane for a 15-hour trip from Istanbul to San Francisco, because he said we don't want to promote terrorism by having foreign airline having people bring laptops in on foreign airlines. So that promotes people who want to work use the American Airlines. The security so you have to check your laptop in your luggage. If there's a bomb in the laptop, it will go off in the luggage container room, And in fact, in Istanbul, in the airport, it's the best security I have ever seen. They check all of your luggage as soon as you enter the airport, before you go into the lounge, before you get on the plane. So the safest thing would be to have them have the laptop with you that they have inspected, rather than have it in your luggage, which you could have a time delay, explosive in it. So again, it's not thinking through, what does this mean, or not having some this should be the director of transportation or Homeland Security. But I think this is just Trump says, here's my plan and make it work.
You also mentioned an increase in hate crimes and bullying in schools, picking on kids of different ethnic groups. Maybe you want to say more about that?
We've documented in our Rosemary Sword and I, we do a monthly Psychology Today blog, and I don't remember the details, but in fact, it's before it was during the end of the election campaign, and certainly into Trump's presidency. All of his negativity, he's against, this, and then all the exposés of his misogyny, his misuse of women, and then his anti-Muslim, anti-immigrants has now spread. It's giving acceptance to people wanting. It's promoting the deepest kind of prejudice against the other, that anybody who's different. So now it's reviving, although he's not saying, it's reviving anti-Semitism. It's reviving anti-African American hostilities. So it's giving voice to a minority of Americans who maybe were always prejudiced, who were always hated Jews, hated blacks, hated Muslims, But the point is, it's hating the other, the other as right. Different, rather than the other as different, but not inferior. So that prejudice mentality is, anyone who's different from you fits in the category of the other, and the other is dangerous because you don't know them and you don't want to know them. And therefore they have to be contained in some way, segregated in a certain place in a city, not allowed into your schools, and then you, as you said earlier, you're on the path of Nazism. Segregate them in the school, not allow them to work, in your business, not allowed to have business of their own, and so the really nasty effect of Trumpism is promoting in America the worst values of prejudice, discrimination, dominance. I'm sure there's even a general increase in bullying. just giving people kids who would ordinarily might do some bullying. It's now encouraging them to be tougher, to be dominant. So again, his thing is being tough, being tender, being compassionate. Is certainly for men is like being a sissy,
Right.
and so he's promoting that horrible alternative reality.
Some have criticized those who have compared him to Hitler or Stalin, but when you say that in some ways he's bringing us on the road to Nazism, maybe you could say more about that, because I think that's a very crucial point.
Well, I mean, okay, I don't want to say Trump is like Hitler or Trump is like Stalin. I mean, those two were unique in their mentality and their desire to rule the world, and it was a different era. So for Hitler, he's trying to rebuild a Germany that was wiped out, in the First World War, and he needed an enemy, and the enemy was Jews. So essentially, you create an enemy. So Trump has not exactly. So Trump is kind of doing that with Muslims, kind of doing that with Mexicans, with immigrants. So
maybe
all
not
I'm
to
saying,
the same degree, but a similar dynamic. What you're calling this hostility towards the other, and
the dynamic is establishing an enemy, and an enemy that is threatening your way of life, and you have to take action. And the action is not conflict resolution. The action is not discussion, but the action is containment, limiting them. In this case, having laws that limit their mobility, having laws that make it easier to imprison them, or not have them have access to the kind of jobs and schooling and other things that is part of the American heritage. So it's okay. Trump is more like Hitler than Winston Churchill. Okay, so I think we need, so I'm saying he's not a Hitler, he's not a Stalin, but on that continuum, he's more to the right than he is to the left.
Well, that's been the new trend in DSM-5. The new trend I know that's not your preferred orientation, but the new trend in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual has been to see personality disorders on a spectrum. So I think what you're saying is very valuable. No, he's not as bad as Hitler, but he's on the Hitler spectrum.
He's on that side of the spectrum, and it's not clear what could happen to move him on the other side. But as I said, he said earlier that his administration has done more positive things than any administration since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And then he says, and of course Roosevelt had to deal with the Big Depression. And then it turns out it's a lie. They have achieved nothing. He has signed no bills. There's not a single positive change that has occurred in these last months since he's a president. So he just makes up things, and then I think he convinces himself that he says it, and then, as I said, he says it. He is himself saying it, and then he apparently had this cabinet meeting, and he went around, and each person in the cabinet had to say how much they appreciate being part of his team. So again, it's no criticism allowed, and it was adulation. Each one had to say how much he likes Trump, how much he enjoys being part of the team. So again, it's so that's the narcissism to the extreme, and to do it publicly, and it's not even embarrassing to him that I don't think he has the capability to feel embarrassed. That is, I think nothing he does could be embarrassing, because if he does it, it should be done. It's the way to do it.
You made a point earlier, and I hate to ask you to repeat yourself, but we had a very crackling, popping sound, and we have a better connection now. You were talking about these different types that you wrote about in your Time book. and where you characterize him among those types. Could you maybe just say a little more about that, or say it again?
Yeah. So I have done a lot of research. I started a whole line of research on the psychology of time perspective, how each of us partitions our actions, our thoughts into time zones or time categories. And obviously the big things are past, present, and future. Now, I developed a scale, the Zimbardo Time Perspective Inventory, which is now used around the world in dozens of nations of researchers, in which we say it's more nuanced. So that is, when I ask you, tell me about your past, for some people, what they're going to focus on is success, good times, happy birthdays, your good friends, family gatherings. And we call those people past positive. Other people ask the same question, tell me about your past. I'm going to tell you about failures, regrets of things they didn't do, abuses, and all the negatives. So we call those people past negative. That is, that's a dominant orientation. Now, for example, people who develop post-traumatic stress disorder are people stuck in a past negative mindset. Now, there's two ways to be present-oriented. One is be present hedonistic. And it's not necessarily negative. It simply means you seek pleasure, you seek novelty, you seek sensation, you're a doer. You join every group. You're always active. You always engage in everything. But it's okay if you're a child. It's not okay if you're an adult, because again, you do without thinking. You do what other people are saying, what other people around you are telling you to do or think. And so these are present hedonists. Now, the other way to be present-oriented is what we call present fatalist. That is to say, and this is true of many poor people or people from some religions, to say, I don't plan the future because I don't have any control over it, because I'm poor, because I have no resources, because I'm in an economically unstable environment, or unstable family environment, or, depending on my religion, Allah makes the decisions. My life is predetermined. So we call those people present fatalists. Most educated adults, most people in business, most people in politics are heavily, positively future-oriented. That is, they're always what do I do now to get the best outcome tomorrow? Why do you go to school? You go to school not just to be smart. This is a path to success. That you get good, you work hard, you study, you get good grades, you go on to college, you go on to medical, law school, et cetera, and then finally you become a businessman or a doctor, whatever it is. So to be positively future-oriented, is focus on what do I do now to have good effects later. So again, people of that kind have hope that what I do, I believe will make a difference. Now, on the other hand, you can be future-oriented negatively, meaning you worry, you're anxious. I have all these goals, but I might not be able to succeed. I don't have enough talent for it. I don't have enough support. I don't know how to go from here to there. So essentially, time perspective is really a central way for all of us. I mean, I call my book The Time Paradox, because I'm saying every decision we make fits into one of those time categories, and we're unaware that in our head we have these different time zones working.
And what you were saying about Trump is that he's a present time hedonist, so he doesn't think about consequences.
No, he's the most extreme example of a present hedonist. Now, all addicts, drug addicts, chocolate addicts, shopping addicts, sex addicts, are extreme present hedonists. That means once you do it, if you take pleasure, you can't stop redoing it, because all you want is pleasure. And even though you're smoking addict, the consequences. If I shoot up heroin, if I shoot up cocaine, and you're not a kid, you're a teenager, you're older, the consequences. If you smoke, you're going to die of cancer eventually. But it doesn't matter. That is, your behavior now is only to get pleasure in the moment, and you never say if then what. So it's never if then. It's never thinking about what I'm doing now has to have some future consequences. So I mean, it's even at the level of, so you're diabetic, and what do you know you're not supposed to do? You're not supposed to be eating sugar. You're not supposed to be eating, but you go and you buy a banana split, or you buy a box of chocolate, and you pass it around and you eat it. So you do things which are dangerous to your health. The problem is, when you're in a position like Trump, what you do is dangerous not only to you, it's dangerous to America, and now dangerous to the world.
And that, I think, gets to the heart of why you feel, as a psychologist, you have a duty to warn, and why that trumps Goldwater.
Yeah, that is. I think. I think we have not seen the most extreme form of Trumpism. That is, that's the danger. Even though what he's done is inconceivable in a president, I think as he becomes more threatened, maybe with this Russian influence scandal, as he feels more threatened, as his power is more threatened, he's likely to do really more dangerous, more extreme things to get attention, to get people to show that he is the power man. He's in charge. He's the dominant Trump power broker, and the world is his apprentice.
So part of the reason you're warning is because you can see that following this trajectory, there's potentially, he doesn't look forward to the future consequences, but you do. And you're seeing that there could be the potential for much greater destructiveness than we've already seen.
Yes, I mean, the point is not just me. I mean, all thinking Americans have to say, this man was elected by, by electoral college, again, 3 million people more preferred Hillary Clinton, and you imagine how different the world would be if Hillary Clinton was in charge rather than Trump. But he presents an unpredictable danger, because what he might do, it's almost impossible to predict, because I'm saying he's like a little kid, in a sandbox with a hammer, and is he going to hit some other kid with it, or is he going to, make a toy with it? And so he's as likely to do something destructive, more likely, than anything constructive. And I'm saying, and given he is the most powerful person in the world, I should say, in general, I'm an optimist. I have studied evil, in the prison study beyond, and essentially, I understand how easy it is for good people to do bad things. And now, in recent times, I've developed what I call the Heroic Imagination Project, where we teach young people how to be everyday heroes. How to transform compassion into effective social action. So I'm optimistic that young people who are our future can become everyday heroes, can do deeds of goodness and caring every day as part of their sociocentric orientation, meaning my main concern in life is not about me, it's about what can I do to make somebody else happy, effective, more functioning. And so egotism is the enemy of heroism. And I'm saying, so Trump is, for me, the ultimate egotist, slash narcissist, slash, unbridled present hedonist. And that's a dangerous combination.
And that can lead to evil.
That can lead to big evil. When in fact, what we need is a president who encourages us to be heroic rather than to promote this negative, evil orientation.
Well, I really want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me. Your contribution is very valuable.
Thank you.
And thank you for contributing to our effort. I'm very grateful that you're on our team.
Yes. Now, the other thing I would say, of course, is your listeners should go to the Psych Today blog. So Rosemary Sword and I do one every month, so we have a number of them there, and many of them deal with different aspects of time perspective, and also the heroic imagination. I guess it's .com. We have a lot of information about how young people can be involved in developing this heroic mentality.
Now, I'm just going to ask you, put you on the spot here. If we are able to, we're having a duty to warn multi-city meeting on Saturday, October 14th. There is someone who's organizing a San Francisco event. Would you by any chance be willing to speak?
I would, except I will be at that moment in my hero project in Budapest.
Yes, you're a man of the world, I know.
Yeah, I mean, I have our program now is it's in a dozen countries around the world, but Budapest, we are in 10,000 high schools throughout all of Hungary. So when I say our program, it's social psychology lessons that I redesigned for high school students and college students, and now we're reworking them for middle school students. And I go around the world presenting this material, training teachers and trainers and business people. So I go to Hungary every year. I go to Sicily every year. I go to Poland every year. But that year I'm going also to Qatar and Morocco, where we're going to start programs.
Well, thank you for your heroism, and I very much appreciate your speaking out. I'm